motorcycle, and there's my father.
So here we are live. We are live.
Yeah.
Welcome everyone. I think you can hear me. 1, 2. Good. Okay. So today we tackle the book of Hosea. And you know, it always starts the same way with me. I don't know if you have this feeling where you start reading a prophet and you think, it's same old, same old. All these prophets are the same. It's the same message. It's the same thing. How do I tackle each prophet if they're all, they feel like they're the same? And so for me, what happens is I have to read over and over and over again until I find the uniqueness of that particular prophet. And until I do, I'm really frustrated because I want to know what is unique about this individual. And Hosea is one of the minor prophets. You know that prophets are divided into major and minor. That division is really an artificial division. It has to do with the amount of writing they did, not how important they were or how important their message was. They're all in the major leagues, okay? The major and the minor prophets, they're all in the major leagues. They all are equal when it comes to the seriousness of their message and the sacredness of their message. Okay, so that's important to know. But the minor prophets, basically, we have less. Their books are shorter. That's why they're minor prophets. So we start on the first of the minor prophets, and the rest of the minor prophets will take us all the way to the end, pretty much, of the Old Testament. Okay, so Hosea. You know that there was the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom during this time. And Hosea, as well as Micah, whom we will study later, they were in the north. So the northern kingdom was taken over by Assyrians first, and it ceased to exist as a nation. And then you have people like Jeremiah and Isaiah in the south, who later prophesy in the south that the same thing will happen to us. So in some ways it's a little bit difficult as we read the prophets because we're jumping around historically, right? We already talked about Jeremiah and Isaiah and the southern kingdom and the exit Jeremiah was in Babylonian exile and the return, and now we have to go back almost 100 years because now we're in the north again, in the northern kingdom. Second book of Kings talks about it historically. But this is how it's designed, so this is how we do it. Some people, what they will do is they will try to do a Bible study by historically aligning, historical Bible study. So they'll jump around in the Bible, but they'll keep the historical line going so that you're chronological in terms of history. I like to read it the way it's composed in the Bible. So that's how I study it. But that means we have to understand we're going back in time a little bit. We're in the northern kingdom now. And imagine this scene. So setting the scene a little bit. The northern kingdom is in a very comfortable position. Everything is working for them. 2 cars in every driveway. Okay? Everybody's doing well. Everybody's wealthy. Everybody's connected. So when we hear Hosea who is saying bad things are coming, people are not resonating with that because they're saying, well, look around you. Everything's fine. The stock market's doing well. Everything's fine. So Hosea was already seeing, and obviously was receiving the message of God, of what will happen, the impending end, even as things on the surface seemed like they were very, very good, And so that's part of the challenge of Hosea is he's called upon to preach the message of repentance, even as people are not able to see, well, why? God is blessing us. Everything's fine. So the book of Hosea is set in that kind of a scene in the northern kingdom. Assyrians are slowly coming in and exploring the land and so on, but they're friendly. Everything's fine. They're even actually helpful. They're making all kind of alliances. So nothing seems like there's going to be a problem. And then within a few years, they are overcome by Assyrian invasion, which Hosea prophesied, and then a few exiles where they're actually taken out of the land to Assyria, northeast, northwest from where they are. Yeah. So Iraq, Iran, those kinds of areas today. Now, a little bit about Hosea as a prophet. And then we'll go into the book and kind of the structure of the book. But Hosea was called to experience the heart of God. So in a very real way, Hosea's message was not only to be preached, but he was supposed to live it. And you'll see it, you probably saw it in the first 3 chapters of the book, where God is basically telling Hosea to live a life of great discomfort. And he's inviting Hosea to stretch his love as far as it can possibly go by loving the unlovable. And so, in practical terms, Hosea is not only preaching the word, but he's living the word. And that's why in the book you will see a man. When I read the book, it feels very almost bipolar, where on the one hand he's crying and then he's hopeful and then he's distraught again and he's hopeful and he's naming all the sins, but then he's saying, but mercy will come, but judgment has to. So it's a man who's deeply wounded by his personal experience. And this is all in the context of a family. So Hosea is unique in that he calls God the husband. God is the husband, and the Jewish people are the wife, the spouse. So he's framing the relationship between God and his people as a marriage. This is very unique, and this is the first time that it's mentioned in the Old Testament as a marriage. Obviously, Jesus will pick up this theme, right? The bridegroom and so on, and the bride. We see the same theme in the Song of Songs. The bridegroom comes, the bride needs to prepare and so on. But in Hosea, this is not only an image, but this is a reality of his life, because he is asked by God to marry Gomer. And Gomer is, and he says, this woman will be unfaithful to you, and you will be faithful to her. And she will continue to be unfaithful to you, and you are asked to be continually faithful to her. And even when she goes out and sells herself into slavery, you will go after her, you will buy her out, you will bring her back. And even your children will be named after the sins and events of the Jewish people. So to us, this may seem shocking, right? Because how can God ask someone to do that? But I wonder how much Hosea desired to know the heart of God. He desired to know what it feels like for God to be in a relationship with his people. And God said, if you do this, you will begin to understand how I feel. And you will be stretched. Hosea, because of that experience, so Hosea does it. He marries Gomer, he's faithful to her, continually, even as she remains unfaithful to him, over and over again. What's incredible about Hosea is not that he was triumphant in his prophetic profession, but that he was he experienced the heartbreak of God in a very real way. He was heartbroken because he was invited to live in a broken family, and yet to live as if the family is not broken. Right? It's easy to love my spouse when I know she loves me. It's easy to be faithful when I know she's faithful. But even according to the Jewish law, if your spouse is unfaithful, you have every right to divorce her. This was allowed, this was permitted, and even encouraged. So this here, Hosea is basically presented the heart of God, that it goes beyond even what's allowed for under Mosaic law. That God's mercy, God's love extends so far that he will always take back, right? That he will, even when when we make this covenant, when God makes a covenant with his people, and a covenant of love, which means both sides are to love one another. But God, even when the Jewish people remain unfaithful, God continues to be faithful. Even when they stop loving, God continues to love. Even though God has every right to break the covenant and to say, no more. You are not my people anymore. I will go and choose other people. God would have every right, according to the Mosaic law, to do that. But God, it's almost like God is weighing his justice and his mercy in one of the chapters. I think it's in latter chapters. And it's, anyway, it doesn't matter what chapter. And then he's moved by his mercy so much that he says, yes, there will be consequences of that lack of faithfulness. So there will be a time of pain, but ultimately mercy will triumph. So both justice and mercy are satisfied, but mercy triumphs at the end. And so everything that happens in the life of Hosea is his very life is a proclamation of God's relationship with his people and God's faithfulness to his people in spite of what the people continue to do. So we'll start. Now we'll talk about the book and the structure of the book. So I'll give these out because I like these. These are little drawings from a group called the Bible Project. And you can look them up online and they go through the structure of the book. But no, you can look at it now because I'll speak about it briefly, but you can see how the book is really divided into three main sections. So the first section is chapters 1, 2, and 3, and that's basically the layout, the story of Hosea being asked to marry Gomer, who will be unfaithful to him. Actually, in the book, it says you have to marry a prostitute. So not just someone who is unfaithful, but someone who is choosing, even as a profession, to remain incapable of fidelity. So that's how powerful that is. And then that his experience with his spouse and his children is going to be kind of a prophecy or an unveiling of the history and relationship between God and his people. How God brought them out of slavery. He married them, you could say, made a covenant on Mount Sinai, and then they continued to reject God, continued to choose other gods, continued basically to be unfaithful. And yet God continues to love, right? So that's the first 3 chapters. Then the next 2 sections are basically the naming of all the sins. So a lot in this prophetic book is a list of sins and accusations that God places. Basically says, this is all the things you're doing wrong. So God is naming all the things. And we'll have a handout I'll give you that is fascinating to me because these can be applied to our to our world today as well. What is it that was so sinful in the everyday life of the Jewish people of Hosea's time that are named in this book? And how do we remedy that? Is this still an issue in our day? And how do we remedy that? So God is naming all the sins, and then is giving a little hopeful message in chapter 11, which is, to me, the most beautiful chapter in this book, because it makes me think of my children. There's that beautiful image of God teaching the Jewish people how to walk as if a father is teaching a little boy, by the hands and teaching how to walk. And you remember as parents those first few years of a baby, how that love is incredible. And the closeness, I mean, when I come home, little Charlotte she won't let me take my jacket off. She's climbing up my leg and just wants me to hold her. So I feel that right in that chapter 11, God is on the one hand saying, this is what I did for you since you were a little baby. And then the minute you grew up, the more I called on you, the more you wanted to go away from me. The more I told you I loved you, you wanted to go away from me. And then he says, but there will come a time when healing will happen and we will be reunited. So that chapter 11 is just such a beautiful presentation, unveiling of God as a father and God as a perfect spouse to his people. And then there are some more accusations, chapter 12 to 14. And in 14, the last chapter, there's that final hopeful vision of there will come a time once all is healed and all the pain and suffering that has to happen because of your unfaithfulness has happened, that we will be restored again. And you will become like this big tree from which everyone is being fed. And it ends on that vision. So that's kind of the layout of the book, is lots of accusations, lots of sins, lots of things named that they were doing wrong, but then these glimpses of hope where someday the new Davidic king will reign and will be accepted and we will be one again. So I just want you to kind of think of the healing and saving themes that continue in this book, even as the sins are named and people are accused, and rightly so, of wrongdoing. Now, what were they doing wrong? I mean, we'll look at that in a minute. But I also want to mention this reality, because sometimes people will say, well, why does punishment have to happen after people have sinned? Why couldn't there just be, like sometimes in Christian circles, people will say, well, just accept Jesus as your Lord and Savior, and then it's all fixed. But we know in the reality of our life that that's not how healing happens, right? If I have hurt someone in my family, in my relationship, I can't just expect that in a blink of an eye that can be fixed and we're back to normal. There are consequences to our life of sin. There's a period of healing that needs to happen. So sin has real consequences. It wounds us in a real way. And so God's punishment is not so much a punishment, but it's an acceptance of the reality that unless you go through that period of dealing with the consequences of what you have done, you're not going to be properly restored and healed to enter into a proper relationship again. Does that make sense? Yeah. So for example, think, why does God take them out of their land into almost like a slavery situation again, rather than just heal them there? Well, because God is basically removing them from all the sources of temptation to which they have grown accustomed. I mean, they would be worshiping Baal. They would be engaging in ritual prostitution with this fake god Baal. They would be doing all kinds of things, and then on the Sabbath they would come to God and they would offer Him worship, as if everything's fine. And they just would not change their what they have become accustomed to. And so God had to destroy that whole environment by removing them, taking them out of the place of temptation, basically, right? Like we talk about alcoholics. Alcoholics will not keep alcohol in their house, right? Because when they're in recovery, because they're saying it's too much temptation. There's nothing, I mean, keeping alcohol in your house is not going to cause you trouble, but it can lead to you having a little drink or wanting a little drink or something like that. So this removal from the land is not this severe God who says, well, now you've deserved this and so on. It's God's mercy. God's justice is enacted by God's mercy of saying, I need to create an environment for you to have a chance to properly realize what you have done and what has happened. You have forgotten who you are. You have forgotten how to live as human beings. You're living as beasts, as animals. And so now I have to take you out. I have to do a reset. And it's going to be painful, but it's done out of love, not because God is powerful and can do it, but because God is merciful and doesn't want to give up on His people and move on to someone else. Does that make sense? Okay. So now I want to give these to you. And we will look at the sins named in this. So this is the first 2 pages are the summary of the book. So you don't have to look at that. 3 pages actually. Go on the 4th page, you will find key theological themes. We'll look at that later. Let's look at I think it's number 6, page 6, sins against God in the book of Hosea. Because so much time is taken with these accusations and warnings, I think it's appropriate for us to say, okay, the book of Hosea not only offers hope for the future and love of God and gives you that sense of feeling of God's love, but it actually has real advice for us, what to avoid, okay? So number 1, idolatry and spiritual adultery. These were key sins named in the book of Isaiah. The primary sin of worshiping false gods. Baal was the god of fertility cults. That's why they had ritual prostitution in the temple of Baal, which was supposed to be some magical way or that religious way of becoming, of appeasing God. Likened to a wife's unfaithfulness to her husband. So some scripture scholars say that Gomer, the wife of Hosea, was involved in this, not just prostitution, but this ritual prostitution that was connected to the worship of the false gods. Okay, so in some ways they saw this as a spiritual thing, as a good thing that would bless them and make them make them comfortable in their life. Okay, so idolatry, worshiping of false gods, adoring idols like golden calves, engaging in ritual prostitution, and attributing blessings to Baal rather than to Yahweh, to God. So again, they would say, what are you talking about, Hosea? Baal is blessing us. Look at the way we're living. We have money, we have cars, we have, or whatever they had back then. We have a good life. Why should we worry? Okay. And you have some actual references in it. Okay. So, theological insight, this violates the first commandment, treating God as a non-exclusive and forgetting His deliverance. Okay? So this was an ongoing challenge for the chosen people. We talked about this before. What leads to them always wanting to worship false gods? Their lack of pride in who they are. They always wanted to be like the other nations. They wanted to be like other people. They always looked outside of themselves, outside of what they have received, and thought, they're better than I am. And isn't that what so often we can do? Right? He's a better priest. He's a better preacher. His family is well off, or they have. So always, instead of being grateful for what God has given me, this sin of idolatry has really begun by not accepting oneself and saying, I am the beloved of God, and I am grateful, and that's enough. I don't need to chase and desire and hope to be someone else or something else. Number 2, lack of knowledge of God and superficial worship. So this was, I'll just read it here, ignorance or rejection of true knowledge of God, not just intellectual knowledge, and that led to empty rituals. Now think about this, empty rituals and not a real knowledge of God, knowing God rather than just knowing about God. They knew about God, they knew the scriptures, and they worshipped God. They did the rituals, but their heart wasn't in the right place. They didn't love God. They didn't know Him personally. And that led to meaningless worship. Right? How many people, how often maybe in our lives, we've done that out of that's a real danger that can happen to us too. We can become attached to rituals, and so much so that they can become empty. In other words, a ritual, a way of engaging in prayer, is there to help us to properly love God more and feel God more. But if it doesn't do that, then the ritual is useless. So we have to be mindful of that, because in the Anglican Church, in the Catholic Church, in the Orthodox Church, in many churches, ritual is very important, but only as far as it leads us to knowing God, to loving God, to feeling God. But if it's only, well, I've come, I've done all the things, and got in a fight with someone because the candles weren't exactly in the right position, right? Now it becomes all about the ritual, and the ritual doesn't lead us to loving people more and loving God, and actual fruits of our faith are not visible, then the ritual is empty. You shall know them by their fruits. So this was one of the sins. They knew about God and they did empty rituals.
Somebody one time.
We'll talk a little bit later once the YouTube thing is done, okay, Roger? Just so that, because they can't hear you. And
okay, I was just going to reinforce what you said there.
Oh, sorry?
I was just going to reinforce something you said there.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
It happened in our church. It's a long time, maybe even before I came here, but at the end of the service, the man who hadn't been there before went up to our priest and said, you totally ruined my enjoyment of this service. At the end of the service, you put out the candles in the wrong order.
Oh, yeah. At the end of the service, you put out the candles in the wrong order. Yeah, and that's where, I think the evil one often tempts religious people not by telling them not to believe on God, but telling them to focus on the wrong things in their faith. So what becomes important are non-essentials, like, rituals become empty. Keep doing your rituals, just don't, just focus on them too much and not on what it's supposed to lead us to. It's supposed to lead us to a freedom of a children of God. Like, I'm supposed to feel differently about the world, about my brothers and sisters. There should be these fruits of the Spirit visible. So Social injustice and moral corruption. So that's another one. And number 3, in interpersonal sins flowing from idolatry, including violence, deceit, exploitation, which profaned the land and break community harmony. So they were mean to each other, right? Like, I think of my actions. Am I different when I'm at church than when I'm in a supermarket? Am I different when I'm at church than when I'm driving? Am I two different people, or am I the same person? Am I always a Christian, a follower of Jesus? Not just with people who are fellow Christians, but even with people who are not, especially with the ones who are not, because that's what God requires of us. Number 4, misplaced alliances and pride. So relying on foreign powers, Assyria, Egypt. I talked about this as this almost they had this fixation with other cultures and other religions and other nations, and they were drunk on desiring the kind of power that other nations had and wanting to enter into alliances with them, not realizing that in doing that, they're not trusting God. They're trusting in their own alliances, which then betrayed them, right? Number 5, corruption amongst leaders. So priests, prophets, and kings are named specifically. So priests are the religious leaders. Prophets, there were many false prophets who were preaching a positive message during the time of Hosea and during the time of other prophets. And the false prophets were saying, don't look at Hosea, look how God is blessing you, look how comfortable you are, everything's fine, don't worry about it. So, and kings, even now, mind you, kings of the day were also considered religious leaders as well, because this was in a time when nationality and religion were intertwined. It's hard for us to see that now when we live in this reality, when there is a separation of state and religion, and for the right reasons. But back in those days, kings were appointed by God and were supposed to do good according to God's commands. So corruption amongst leaders is named as a grave sin against God. And again, for us, it's not so that we can now point fingers and say, yeah, that's happening to us too. Look at all the people who are sinning. Because again, this is the Bible, and the message of the Bible. When I read it, it's supposed to be for me, so that I don't use it as a tool against other people. Yes, it's true that others may also be sinning against God, but that's not my business. My business is, how does this apply to me? And how does it change me? How is it supposed to change me? So in our own way, we also have leadership roles in our community, in our family, in our society. And that requires faithfulness to God first and foremost. Number 6, forgetting God's history and covenant. So amnesia about God's past mercies, leading to ingratitude and repeated rebellion. So this was a problem for the Jewish people. They only remembered the bad things, and they never remembered the good things. Remember when they went out of Egypt, and the minute they were hungry, what did they talk about? They talked how good it was in Egypt because they had more food or more variety of food. It's so easy for us to forget the good that God has done in our lives and only focus on what hasn't worked or what doesn't work. We do that about the present as well, or the future. We focus on possible negativity rather than focusing on what is working, what is where we are being blessed, and giving thanks to God for that. Okay? So these are key sins named, worthy of our attention as well in our personal lives and our life as a church, our life as a nation. So a takeaway, you can look at the other sheet I gave you, which is very, very helpful to is theological themes, and I can just read them quickly and then give you a takeaway. So key theological themes: God's steadfast love and compassion, unfaithfulness and idolatry as spiritual adultery, judgment as redemptive discipline, call to repentance and knowledge of God, and restoration and eschatological hope. So, for me, the main key takeaway from Hosea, and this is maybe personally for me, because Hosea resonates with me, because Hosea had a really tough job and a tough life. He was rejected by his family, by his wife, by his nation, by his religious leaders, by everyone, right? Even in his home, he had that pressure and tension. Think about stress, like how much stress he was under. And yet, he continued to move forward, one step at a time, one step at a time. It doesn't mean that he was that he was not unaffected by it. He was affected by it, just as we are affected by all kinds of pressures and difficulties and struggles that we must undergo. But to me, he is an incredible example and inspiration for me personally, because what he teaches me is that I just have to take one step at a time and continue to move forward, continue to do my thing. Doesn't matter what happens around me. I need to keep my word. I need to show up. Just show up every day. Show up for whatever it is that you have promised or God has asked you to do. And you may not see any results. That's okay. But show up and move forward. Show up, move forward. Like for him not to just throw everything out and say, the heck with it. You know, my wife and my children, everything's falling apart. And then, no, he was deeply affected by it, but he continued to move forward with hope, that hope came from God and from a sense of a meaning that he derived from being able to do his part. Like even if everyone's unfaithful, I will continue to be faithful to what I promised. I will show up. Maybe no one else will show up. I will show up. I will do this. I will take one little step at a time. And for me, that is very, very inspiring. And so I just want to share that with you, because personally for me, I love Hosea's tensions that exist in this book. I love the humanity of God as a father, God as a husband, God as the one with a broken heart, and yet the one who continues to reach out, continues to give hope, continues to find ways. So I love that. I love chapter 11 especially, but I primarily what resonates with me is just show up. Just, do your part. And don't worry so much about what's happening out there. You can be aware of it, just don't worry about it. If you do your part, that will be a source of meaning and hope and purpose for you, and God will do the rest. Okay, so that'll end our live stream here. Thank you everyone for watching, and we will see you in the next session next month. Oh, not next Wednesday. There won't be one. No, there will be one next Wednesday. Yes, there will be one online only though. Next Wednesday, because I have an important meeting in.
So will there not be a mass either?
No
mass,
no mass, or I have to be with the bishop next Wednesday, and that's the only time she has. So yeah, but I will still make an episode and make it available online, so that we're not falling too
Behind.
far behind.
Okay, so
Okay?
that's Micah, right? You're gonna do next week?
That's right.
Online.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.